Gentlemen, welcome to the Be the Man podcast. I'm your host, Greg Denning. I'm the creator and coach in the Be the Man Masterclass and Tribe. Today is a treat. Just over a year ago, my wife and I went to the Galapagos Islands for our anniversary and chartered a yacht with some other couples and sailed around. It was magical. And we took advantage of an opportunity to climb some big mountains while we were there. So I wanted to climb Cotopaxi and get above 19,000 feet. And while we were training for that, we hit some other big mountains, and there's a peak right outside of Quito that I climbed, the Ruku, and you maybe heard the story in some other episodes or other places. It ended up being an unbelievable experience where after we had summited, we were heading back down, and I heard that somebody had fallen, so I handed my pack off to some friends. I went back up, and that day a young woman ended up literally dying in my arms. And then her boyfriend had also fallen, and we helped the rescue teams get him off the mountain. But it ended up being a tragic and very intense day. But before we had summited, I was on my way up, and we had stopped to rest at this beautiful overlook, and there was another group there, and I just started a conversation with this gentleman from Europe, and we just kind of hit it off and had a great conversation. And anyways, that's led to a friendship and some really cool things, and he has an awesome story, and he is our guest today. And he's in London right now. He's doing some amazing things, getting ready to race across the Atlantic. He's climbed, went on an Everest expedition not long ago, climbed massive peaks, just done some really cool things. And so I wanted to have him on as a guest today to share his story and the lessons we can learn, lots and lots of lessons. So, man, please listen carefully as he shares his insights and experiences and what worked and what didn't. I just found myself as listening to this as we were having this conversation, just with so many little nuggets, takeaways, lessons that are applicable to our lives, to where we can make better decisions, clearer decisions, and learn how to drive ourselves and push ourselves and get past our limits and set our sights on big targets and like go live this life that's possible for all of us. We have the potential. The greatness is in you. You just have to unlock it. And there's so much to be gained here from Oliver's story. So without further ado, we'll jump in. I hope you enjoy this and learn some awesome lessons like I did from his experiences and his story. Enjoy. All right, gentlemen, I have been looking forward to this episode and this conversation for a long time. It was about, maybe 14 months ago-ish. Rachel and I took a trip to Ecuador for our anniversary. The morning we woke up in Quito, we jumped on this tram, went up to the Ruku, and we're hiking up, and we're just kind of meandering along the way. And there was a small group of people there. And I'm kind of a gear guy. I love gear. And I glanced over, and this gentleman right here was wearing some cool gear, and I recognized some of it from Europe. And so I was like, hey, I can't remember. I'm like, hey, you're from Europe or something? We just started talking, and it wasn't long. Oliver, we had maybe a couple minutes there. We were just chatting for a second before the group moved on, and he briefly shared his story with me and mine with him, and there was just something special about this story and about Oliver. So I'm super excited to have you on as a guest, brother, and to share your story here with our listeners. So why don't you take it away? Give us your story, even bits and pieces of it. We're going to dive into all kinds of cool stuff, but just back us up and share your story with us.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for having me on. I think about that day that I met you a lot, and it was a crazy day for you because you later saw something terrible, right? I mean, well, you can say what that was, but that was was a pretty awful day for you. For me, I was just full of joy because I love being in nature. I love being in the mountains, and for me, because I'm in recovery and because of the things that the feelings and all the things I've gone through. When I'm doing those ascents, I'm kind of like struck not only with the joy, but also like this kind of surprise, like, oh my God, I'm here, I'm doing this. I can't believe the person that I was is dragging himself up this mountain. And so it's just like, yeah, you know, the pleasure is just rushing at me. And when we started chit-chatting, you know, and it started because I had a Rab, you know, from Sheffield, UK, and you had a Rab, and we were talking about Rab. And then I think you sort of described yourself a little bit first, and you said, oh, you know, I travel around a lot. And I was like, this is probably some arsehole that invested in crypto when it was like 30 cents.
I wish.
He's now just like, that's what I thought. I was like, now he's just like living the dream. And you said, no, I'm a life coach. And I said, oh, well, you like this then. I'm in recovery. And that's when I told you a little bit about, you know, the story and where I'd come and how bad I had been, you know, in terms of, you know, my drinking, all the different issues that I've had, drinking, drugs, low integrity generally. And yeah, that was the starting point. And I knew you were a special person. There was a kind of like light shining around you and your wife as well, actually, because it's not just you're something of a double act, but I knew you were a special person. And then when I sort of found you on Instagram and I saw a bit more of, you know, the work that you do and everything, it was, yeah, it's no surprise to me that I knew that I'd see you again or something would happen. We would connect somewhere in the future. So yeah, glad to be here. I hope we have a good chat. I'm sure, you know, I like, it's nice to talk, and it's nice to talk with people like you that can tease things out of me also, because, you know, I can reach into like feelings, you know, things I want to express through all this conversation. So I'm excited.
And
where should we start?
That's what I loved. In the brief moment we started talking, there was these huge achievements, and then, well, as I remember, recall, like this loss of identity, and then fighting to gain it back, right? And I'm with you, the love of the mountains and the big things. And then you went on, and well, we'll get into this, but he was on Everest and hit big peaks. Even what's the big name? What's the big one in
Chimborazo?
Yeah, Chimborazo, yep. Right? Oh, which is, you break 20,000 feet on that one. But let's back up. I remember kind of your story where it struck for me as you were at one time, if I recall, a professional polo player.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, you know, when I think about where I was, where I started, where I went to, then where I fell to, and how I've managed to recover it, I think in some ways it has helped that I had a bit of success in my 20s and early 30s. So, you know, it wasn't that I was always this basket case. So I was a professional polo player. I'm not good. You know, I like being outdoors. I like being in nature. I like being with my horses. You know, I do obviously do office work, and I have done it, but I fell in love so much with like playing polo. I remember the first time I ever played polo, it was like this intense focus that, you know, I never experienced before, this kind of like feeling. And actually I now get from the mountaineering in the same way that when I first started the polo, I get it from the mountaineering now. And it's just like this, like pure pleasure, pure joy, like focus, concentration. And I got that the first time I played polo. And after this was when I was like 17, 18. And after that, all I wanted to do was be a polo player. I didn't really care about anything else. That was like, and it seemed quite fanciful because I was quite a sort of, you know, going back further before I started playing polo, I was a bit difficult as a teenager. And before that, I was, you know, always overweight. I had bad skin. I was like socially awkward. And that's also when I started drinking, was in my teens, because, you know, I found like social situations very difficult. And if there were girls there, I was terrified, you know. So from a very young age, I started drinking heavily. And I remember
so to tee in there, it was kind of as an escape then. It was the discomfort of it. Like looking back now with totally different eyes, why did you think you started drinking? I
mean, I think there was, I think, yeah, I think that was, if I had to distill it down to one thing, I think it was escape from myself and from this, I liked alcohol's warm embrace. It was kind of like taking it was, like being unpeeled.
Right.
All the sort of restrictiveness, I felt like I couldn't express, not that I expressed myself in a good way when I was drinking, but at least I felt like, I felt kind of more unbounded.
Right.
And so, I remember the first time, I lived in a small village in rural south of England, middle class background. My dad was a surgeon. My mother was a housewife, had 3 sisters. It was a very kind of warm and, it was a happy household.
Mm-hmm.
But I was not necessarily a happy child. I went to a very difficult school. It was very punitive. It was very abusive in many ways, not so much physically, although there was physical abuse. But it was just like a hostile culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of top down. And as a result, everybody was kind of hostile to each other. And so I wasn't that good at, I didn't have a lot of friends at school. I had, I found school, especially this school, difficult. And I learned a lot of bad habits there. And I think that was where I first became that's where I became so insecure, was because it was just a place where you got humiliated, all these things.
Right there.
Embarrassed, humiliated. There were nice guys at the school and people that I'm still in touch with, and I consider them friends, but at the time I didn't really consider anybody we weren't really friendly with each other. It was all just so hostile. So even now, like I did a first aid course the other day, and they said, right, everybody get into pairs, and I had this kind of like flashback to being like 7.
No,
and like, shit, who's going to want to be in the pair with me? I'm going to be the last to be picked, because that's what this was like. It was like, it was a very kind of aggressive. Anyway, so I think that's where, the insecurity started and where I started to feel uncomfortable. I learned that from this institution that I was in, school, boarding school. I went when I was like 7. I started boarding when I was like 9 or 10, but it was difficult. And even before, my parents were trying to do the right thing for me by keeping me as a day boy. So you went daily rather than boarding. But what they didn't realize is there was only 5 day boys. Everyone else was boarding and miserable. So being a day boy, you got picked on, 10 times worse, because you got to go home in the evening. And the bullying was even by the headmaster. He would, he was calling us all day girls, So you can imagine, like, in the end, I was like, yeah, I better start boarding just so I get less shit, and then you're at this boarding school, and it was tough. So,
man, just hearing you tell this story, I can just sense the toxicity of that kind of environment.
Yeah,
and how, of course, it will lead to a deep insecurity, which then the insecurity becomes an underlying poison of sorts that manifests itself along the way.
Yeah, definitely. It was anyway. So I can remember the first time. I'm sure I had drinks before, but I can remember the first time I got drunk was when I was about 13. I went to we call it the pub in England. You don't have this so much in America, but the pub. I went to the pub, and I had a friend who lived in our village, Chris, who was a year older than me. He looked a bit older. He had like sort of stubble, and we went to the pub, and we walked in, a 13 and a 14-year-old. It sounds ridiculous now.
Yes, it does.
Walked into a pub, and we said, can we have 2 pints of lager, which is, when you're that age, a pint is quite a bit. And we got served amazingly. And I didn't think, oh, this is great, we're in, let's have a couple of pints, enjoy it. All I could think was like, I'm going to drink. So I'm going to drink as much of these as possible in the sort of limited time that we've got. I don't know how long. We snuck out. So we probably only had a couple of hours before we went. It was obvious we were missing. So, in this like 2 hours, I think I drank 5 pints, which when you're 13 is like, and it knocked me for 6, and I was so drunk when I came out, I was sick in the graveyard of the church, which was next to the pub. And, that really started this dysfunctional relationship that I had with alcohol. And I had it all the way until I was 35. I'm 40 now. Yeah. So I've been an alcoholic since I was 13, 12 or 13, definitely 13. And I've never had a positive relationship with alcohol. I've never been able to have a couple of drinks. I've been blackout drunk so many times. Like I can't remember how many times I've been blackout drunk. And I thought that was kind of normal, that you would, you would have memory loss, you would have experiences you didn't remember, all this kind of thing. So that, I think less so when I played polo, because I loved playing polo so much that, obviously you couldn't play if you were hungover, and, I wanted to enjoy those. So that actually saved me in my 20s and my 30s when I was playing polo. I didn't drink so much then, but I did drink in the off season. And that was, it was crazy. I used to, so you guys do kilos or you do pounds? We do stones. So I don't really understand pounds, but my weight has always been like up and down like this,
Were you more fit when you were playing polo?
Yeah, so I got fit from playing polo. So when I was 18, so just to recap, so I went to school, struggled at the first school, changed school when I was 13, which is normal. At the second school, found some friends, got a bit more of, was happier. Still was a pretty insecure person, didn't really know who they were, wasn't very academic. There was, I was muddling along. I'd be prone to sort of, I could be not kind to people. I could be aggressive. I could, all these things that I can look back now and understand that, these were emotions that I couldn't process, or I didn't know, so yeah, I wasn't a talented teen or not that I'm talented now, but I was saved in a way by polo. When I was 18, I started playing polo. I was much bigger than I am now. I was, considerably bigger than I am now. Got fitter, started playing polo. That became my thing. Went to university to play polo, or change university, should I say. I went to, and just made polo my focus. And then when I finished university, I did it full time and ended up becoming a professional guards polo club, having a good job as player and manager of a big team. And in that period, I enjoyed, those probably were apart from the last years, those were the best years that I had, where I was very focused. I was very stable. I had a good job. I took the job seriously. I had some standing in my community. I think that's important, that you need to, you need to do something where you feel some kind of standing, respect, appreciation,
Well, and have something that you love. I love this story because you grabbed hold of something, loving the horses, loving the outdoors, loving the sport of it, loving the achievement of it, and it pulled you and drove you in the right direction to keep the alcohol down, to get in better shape, to get a sense of confidence and competence and some security and standing and being in a seriously good place. And so you're moving into this great spot and in a really good place there. And then this is kind of where, when it comes to an end, where everything changed in your life, right?
But it's funny actually you say that, because there were warning signs when I played. It's true. I loved it so much. I took it so seriously, but it brought out some toxic things in me also. I could cheat in matches. I wanted to win so much that I could. Want to let me think of a good example. Like, I remember this in a match that we played, as a big final, and on the main ground at Guards, and I'm embarrassed about this now, but I think the scores were tied, and one of my best friends I was playing against, Pakistani guy, he's one of my best friends, and he hit a neck shot, which is where you shoot under the horse's neck, and it went flying. Kind of over, you don't have gold posts in polo, it's like a post, and in theory, there's no top to it, so you can hit it as high as you want. It kind of went in. And as soon as I saw the shot, I just started screaming, wide, 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 that's gone wide. And I ride my horse flat over to the goal judge. There's a goal judge indicating, that it's a goal. And I'm screaming at him, wide, wide, wide. And then all the other players ride over. The players from their team are saying that was in. Our team is all saying it was wide. We're screaming like, at the officials, at this poor goal judge who's like a 15-year-old kid that's there, on a Sunday. And this eventually got overturned and marked wide. and we won the match. Luckily, I think we won it by 2 goals, so I didn't have to feel too terrible about it. But that's the kind of stuff that I would do, like gamesmanship. I was right at the limit of what is considered, like fair play, or, I was happy to push it. And so, that became an issue for me, definitely, that I was, I wasn't balanced in that sense, in the sense I should have been.
And well, man, this is one thing about you that I admire is you have this drive, brother, to just go into something and go. And we'll get into more of that later, like getting on the big mountains and rowing, massive amounts of rowing, and you go all the way. But I guess I wonder if, I've heard, and we talked about this idea that with every strength, there is an inherent weakness, right? And it's learning where that plays out in our lives. And so this drive you have, the ability to accomplish things and do things that you've done that most of us are like, how do you even accomplish that? But that's a really great principle there. Is like, if we don't temper it, the weakness can come out.
Yeah, I mean, you've got, I think that's one of the themes of your coaching, is that you've got to have power, but you've got to have power with control.
Yeah.
Like, power without control is just like aggression. But you've got to be able to, I couldn't see the bigger picture as a younger person. I couldn't see that, I had another problem. Another problem I had was with food when I was playing, in that, I would get rid of food if I'd eaten too much food. And I had this until, after I started recovery. And then I was like, I started thinking, God, I'm doing so well. I've given up all the bad stuff. And then this thing was there, and I just kind of parked it to one side and considered it kind of normal, because, I don't know how that was, I was considered myself like, and I think it's more common in men that do sports than people realize. I know a lot of triathletes that have had the same thing with food, and they get rid of food sometimes. And I was a bit like that, I would be super self-conscious. I thought I was too big to play polo. That was like my mind. I was like, no one thinks I look like a pro. I was quite a big guy, and all the other pros were like these small guys. And so I was very self-conscious. I had, body dysmorphia. I still have it. I'll take my, I look in the mirror, pull my shirt up, see, and I think I'll always have that, but I don't have the same relationship now that I have with food. I look at it in a much more holistic way. I know that I try not to gorge myself on food, but but if I do, or if I've eaten too much, then I just sit, I sit with those thoughts. I don't let toxic feelings come into it like I had in the past.
Right.
But that was another thing that, that took, but that was my drive. I was just like, I was ruthless. I wanted to win. I wanted to, I wanted shortcuts, is I think what I really wanted. I was looking for all the shortcuts. I didn't want to do the real work. I lacked confidence. I lacked a lot of things, and all the things I lacked, I looked for shortcuts, like hacks. And, ultimately they don't work. You have to do the work. Even when I gave up drinking, I started recovery. We can come on to that later. I didn't actually know I was in recovery at the beginning. I thought I was just taking a break. And, I thought this would be a quick fix. In a year's time, I'll be like a millionaire having a mega job. And it's been 5 years, and I feel like it's, I've got through phase 1, shall we say. I'm through phase 1, but it's, there's no, look, there are people that get super lucky and buy $10,000 of Dogecoin and become, but they're few and far between. Mostly it's mastery and hard work that gives you the big rewards. And I didn't see that when I was younger. I mean, I should have done, because, this where I did have success was in my polo, but I put a lot into that. I put a huge amount, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours. So much of all of my resources went into that to get me to that point. And so, it should have been obvious to me. So when I actually transferred careers and I went to work in finance, I thought that would be easy as well. But I didn't realize that it hadn't been easy to get where I'd got to in polo, it just been, it'd been so long, the journey, that I'd kind of forgotten, it takes 10 years to get really good at something. And so if you're a financial advisor, when you're 20, if you start when you're 25, by the time you're 35, you could be a good financial advisor. For me, I was 35 working in finance, and it was tough. I was like a junior. I'd lost my standing. I didn't have the community anymore. I didn't have the job. I didn't feel respected. And it brought out the worst in me. And so that was when...
And just to draw that out, it really felt like a step down or a step backwards leaving polo. And so kind of exacerbates some of the pain. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, it definitely, I made a conscious decision. I really thought that there was an opportunity for me, in finance, and there was, had I approached it with a better mindset, get your head down, learn as much as you can, be super humble. It's not what transpired at all. It really brought out the worst side of me, this first job. I got better after they fired me, because, I realized that, I had to get better. Mm-hmm. But initially, it did, leaving professional sport did not bring out the best version of me, shall we say. And that was really when the decline started, and all the problems I'd had that, all my life that had been bubbling away under the surface with alcohol, drugs, everything. That's when they came out to the surface, because I was kind of, I was all at sea. I was in a new environment where, I didn't feel respected. I didn't feel in any way motivated, or it was just literally, I was not it wasn't the right place for me to be. And it brought out the worst in me.
And before, maybe this is a good time to touch on it. You had mentioned integrity before, and the different approach you have to integrity then versus now. And is this where that really started to come out?
Yeah, I think integrity is incredibly important. If you don't have it, you need to get it back urgently. And I think that's one of the problems with drinking. There's very few people that are big drinkers that have managed to retain integrity, because, it's one of my favorite quotes about alcoholism it goes like this. It's an alcoholic is somebody who will violate their standards quicker than they can lower them. And that is incredibly true. And so what happens when you drink a lot, when you take drugs, your perception of what's going wrong is completely altered. You're seeing it through this incredibly, foggy lens. And that's what the funny thing was for me when I stopped drinking. I had the alarm bells had been ringing for years, and at the end they were just like, I was like, okay, I need to stop. But at the time I didn't know that I was stopping forever. In fact, I couldn't tell myself I was stopping forever, because it was like, somebody dying. It was like, if I were to describe how it felt at the time, it was like, imagine your very close friend of yours is going to die, but you're going to be the person that pushes them off the cliff. It felt like that. The whole thing that I had, all the things that I thought I enjoyed. I thought I just, the drink, the drinking, the escape, the moments where I was a big drinker by myself, that I would just sit and drink and wild with my thoughts. And, I couldn't bear the thought of losing this. So when I stopped, I said to myself, I'm going to stop for a year just to get back on track. Yeah. And then during that period, I started to see myself through my clear lens finally. And I was like, oh my God. And so all this behavior that I'd normalized, I started to see how bad it was, all the things that I'd done and how they weren't normal. And so that was when I realized that, I wasn't taking a break. I was in recovery, and I had serious behavioral problems, and I was not on a good path. And that was one of the things that I remember thinking, was because I'd had success playing polo, and because I'd been happy, and because I'd had what I considered to be an amazing life, I was like, this isn't the life that the universe planned for me. Like, this wasn't how it was supposed to go. I'm not supposed to be, and I was so unhappy at the end also. I just remember on the last night, I think it was June 9th, 2017. Yeah, I went out, and I was living in Zurich, and I went out with some of my friends, and we had some drinks, and we went to a club. I was there till 7 or 8 in the morning. At some point, I lost the friends. I was just wandering around. I came out and it was light. I thought it was like 3 a.m. I was in shock. I was like, oh my God, how can it be like 8 or 9 a.m.? And how has that been such a shit night that I've, spent a fortune, to the next 3 days are going to be a write-off because I'm going to be so hungover and tired, and I'm not happy, and I'm a long way from where I was. My star is massively, massively diminished, and and I was super overweight. I was everything. It was a very chaotic time, and so I took that. Sorry.
Go ahead. Well, how do in that moment of like literally being in the party, in the intoxication, all of that, how do you think you saw more clearly at that moment? Like what made a difference that finally you were like, this, like it was bad enough you decided to change, or at least
that's the great Tony Robbins quote is change comes when the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same. And that's what happened to me, that I was so afraid of changing, because actually there were parts of my lifestyle that I loved. I loved the drink, I loved the escape. I loved, that was where I got, that was the armor that I put on for the insecurity and all the problems that I had that I couldn't address. That's how I cope with them. That was my main crutch, was alcohol and sometimes drugs, but I had other crutches as well. Clothes were another crutch for me. I used to spend a fortune on Laura Piana jumpers and other things to make me feel better about myself. Clothes was one. I had a Range Rover Sport as well. I thought that gave me something. All these crutches that I had. Drinking was just one of them. And and in this, in the period of the time that I've had, I've come to see myself just as I am, and to be happy just as I am. And I don't need to be super successful or super wealthy, or, I don't need to wear expensive clothes now. I just come to, appreciate myself for, just the person I am, not better than anyone else, but not worse than anyone else. And that's the main thing that I've come, is that the crutches, my life, the crutches were everywhere. Like travel, but I don't mean like travel is a very important way of expressing yourself. But I would be traveling like, I thought you had to go business class. I thought you had to go into like amazing hotel. All these kind of things, they were just crutches. I was like, that's how I made myself feel better about myself, was through all these material things, plus alcohol, plus sometimes other substances. Yeah.
Man.
And so when I hit the rock bottom,
so insightful.
When I hit the rock bottom, I was just like, I was like, I can't, it was literally just like, I can't do this anymore. Something has got to change, and I literally, it was like, I could feel it. It was like, there was like a door was opening above me, and there was just like a light, and I was like, I'm going to go through the door. I'm going to drag myself through the door. And that's why I'm always telling people, there's many doors in the universe, and this door opened for me there. And I was like, I'm going through that door. And it was very difficult. It took 18 months just to normalize. Like, I was naked without alcohol. Like, I was, I had to start from scratch. It was, I had been more or less like this since I was 13. I had to refine, I had to find my real self. Like, what was I really like? And I didn't realize this. I thought I was an extrovert because I was always lubed up. I was always like talking to strangers, and like, yeah, because I'd had a few drinks, and that's what But actually, I'm quite introverted, and I'm quite quiet and shy, and like, I don't like big parties and lots of people, and if I find it difficult, and that is fine. But I was, I'm just, I couldn't cope with that at some point when I was younger. So I'd be like, drinking, and then this brought out this kind of more gregarious side of me, and I was like, that's the fun guy. Yeah, let's feed this. Let's feed this wolf that's inside me, and let's see this personality come out. And that's how I was. And so, yeah, then what was the real me? Well, the real me was, quite quiet, and I had to be reborn. Like, and I remember, like, the first time I kind of went out was about 6 months after I stopped drinking, and I met up with my school friends, like really good friends of mine, and we met up at this hotel bar in the city of London, the Ned, it's called, and we walked in. I was the last person to arrive, and I just felt so like, sort of just like naked, like I didn't, I was just like, and I got to the group, and I was like, and I started stuttering, like I couldn't speak properly, like which is like that. Now that's how I felt for a long time, until then. It started over a period of time, and I really credit the physical exercise I did. So, in this transformation that I've done, there's so many bits of transformation, but one of the main things, or the things the bit I did first, in a way, or simultaneously, but I put a lot of effort into, was physical. Because I was so big, I was like 100 kilos. I'm 85 now, but I was like 100 or 105 kilos. So I looked, I didn't look good. So I first, like, running. And I think also that was a kind of like a shame that I was, I felt a lot of embarrassment and a lot of shame at the beginning. And I think the physical part of me I was like, oh God, I need to shed that. That is part of that person.
And so I really, so just like, when you decided to stop, you weren't intending on stopping. It was taking a break, but you went cold turkey, right? You just done.
Yeah. Yeah. I went cold turkey. Yeah.
And then how quickly did you get into like exercise? And like you said, that first 18 months was quite challenging. That was one of my questions. I'm like, hey, what are you doing to even move and function during that time? Was it quite quickly getting into like training and physical fitness as a new outlet and a new way of being?
So I think in terms of, for people that might be dealing with these kind of issues, drinking too much, taking drugs, whatever it might be, I think my starting point, I did 3 things on day 1 of recovery. And I think maybe not each, I think, well, they have different levels of importance. The first thing I did, okay, and this is the most important thing, and if you can't do this, I think it's really hard to succeed in cracking the recovery. The first thing I did was I called up my mum, and I said to her, I didn't call my parents that often. I was so concerned with my world. What am I doing? How much fun am I having? What's my agenda? So my mum's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to tell you something." And she's like, "Okay, what is it?" And I said, "I'm an alcoholic." And she said, "Well, I could have told you that." And I was like, "What?" And she said, "Yeah, I've been trying to tell you this for years." And I said, "Oh God, and I didn't realize. I'm sorry." And she said, "Don't worry." And I said, "Well, listen, I realize that now, and I'm going to stop drinking." And I said that I literally, this is on the morning when I've decided. I called my mom, and she said, "Okay, well, look, we love you, and let's see what you can do." And then I called my sisters, and then I called my ex-girlfriend, and she was an amazing person that she'd had to live through this whole time when I was always, out, and, I'd come back and I'd sleep in the bed and I'd be super drunk, and, I didn't behave well, and, I didn't, I wasn't a good partner to her. So I called her and I said, this is what I'm doing. And she said, "Okay, well, let's see." And so that was my starting point, was the honesty. Like, you have to I had a problem and I had to take ownership of it. And so that was the starting point. And people that that I coach informally, like people that call me up and say, look, I'm having these problems that you had. How do I deal with it? I said, listen, you got to tell somebody important to you. Mm-hmm. And that is going to keep you honest. That's going to give you a shot. And people always say the same thing. They say, oh, I couldn't tell mom and dad. They'd be so embarrassed. They'd be so angry. There'd be all these things. And I just say to them, I was like, well, they're probably already embarrassed. They probably already know. You have let them down. You will have let them down many times because of this. They will have seen you at family parties, whatever. It will already be embarrassing. So the best thing you can do, the best thing you can do is take ownership. And that, coming back to the integrity, that is what you're trying to get back, is the integrity. You started here when you were born, you fell down to here, and now we're trying to get back, and we can even push beyond. But yes, the starting point is you have to be honest with people. That's for me anyway. That was the first thing. The second thing I did was I did two things simultaneously. The London Marathon. I entered the London Marathon for the next year.
You just went ahead and signed up
on that day.
Yeah,
because I knew that I needed. I also knew, like, deep down, that I was playing catch up on my potential, that I'd wasted several years of my, I hadn't made any progress. So I was like, I need to start a supercharge program here.
I gotta go.
And I look back, I can sort of say that now, but I didn't really have a game plan or anything. I was just like, I just had this feeling. It's like, this is not going well. I am not where I should be in my career, in my personal life, not in a relationship. That I had an amazing relationship. She doesn't want me anymore. I need to get back on track urgently. So I just entered the London Marathon and I signed up for Landmark, the personal development course.
Fantastic.
And those three things, and I hadn't ever considered personal development before. I'd never read any of the books. I hadn't considered spirituality, religion, any of these things. I was like closed. Anyway, so those, I would say, the honesty, but then starting to, looking for, through Landmark, I was looking for techniques, things that I could learn about myself. I didn't possibly know that I wanted to learn about myself, but I had an idea. It's like, what's my nature? Why am I like this? Why am I having these problems? Why am I always falling into the same traps? And so that started the journey where it's like, I need to get to the bottom of this. I need to, I think, understand what's the underlying thing. And then from that, once I know that, I can move on. Exactly. And hopefully I can grow, I can become more successful, however success can mean to me. And at the time, for me, the success was just like financial. When I played polo, my success, I measured that by how well I played, how well the team, and I didn't think of it in monetary terms. I thought about it in cups, win rate. That was the most important thing to me. I think also that I really was lucky that the guy I worked for in polo, I loved him, and how much he was enjoying it was important to me. That was so yes, the win rates, but I would see, is he happy? Is he having a good time? But I never thought about like how much money I earned from it, or I was just that. It was just it was a love affair.
Yep.
When I started working in finance, I was just like, oh, how much money can we make? And, what clothes can I buy with the money that I'm going to make? And what car am I going to have? And, I just saw it like through the lens of materialism. Mm-hmm. And so, started this great journey on June 10th, 2017. It's 5 years in a month, and coming up to 5 years.
That's so awesome. Kudos and honor and respect to you for that. So huge. So then somewhere along there, it was Kilimanjaro, right? How did you transition now into mountains? Because by the time I met you, you were ripped. you were hitting peaks like nobody's business, right?
Yeah,
How did that happen?
So so I came back from Zurich and I started I'd been made redundant in Zurich. The business that I'd worked in had failed and everybody had been made redundant. So I came back, no job. And I went to live with my parents because the farm that they had where I kept the horses had fallen into not disrepair, but obviously like over the time that I had all my horses and everything there, it hadn't. Anyway, so I went back and I was like, I'm going to do the right thing for them. I'm going to fix the place up. I'm going to paint all the stables. I'm going to live very quietly and I'm going to start running. And yeah, in those 2 years, I did a lot of work on myself. And I needed to. I mean, I was literally lost. I had taken my armor away. And so during that time, I kind of went through the rebirth, and a lot of the time that, the first thing that I had was embarrassment. So take away take away my crutch of, so typically this is what happens to people that are heavy drinkers. They behave badly, they embarrass themselves, and they cope with that by drinking more to alleviate that feeling. And then they do something else, embarrass themselves even more the next day. And it's just a cycle of going around like that. And, until, you kind of forget the things that embarrassed you. So becoming sober, I suddenly had to cope with all these things that I'd done. Times I'd been rude to someone, all these, whatever it was, all these, even, the mistakes I'd made when, at work, all these, all sort of things that I realized that cumulatively were my low integrity. I had to then cope with these.
Yep.
The embarrassment was the first feeling. And then after that was like shame. I mean, the first 6 months I had this like deep sense of embarrassment. And the next 6 months I had this deep sense of shame. And I think, I didn't have a therapist then or a life coach. I wish I had. I was kind of doing it all myself. I didn't have a lot of cash. I wasn't into the books in the way that I am now. So I was looking for tools, coping tools. And the running became super important to me because it was like, well, I could see myself improving for one. The first time I went out running, I couldn't run 3K. I did it every day for a month and I could run 5K. I did it every day for 2 months. I could run 10K. Suddenly I was like, okay, I'm the guy that can run 10K. And this was giving me like some confidence. And at the same time, when I was running, I was processing. I was processing, who I was, what I'd been through, trying to understand why. And it was a little bit of like self-flagellation also, like penance for my sins. But I felt each time I ran and each time I got a little bit better, I felt the kind of like easing, the easing of, and over a period of time, I started to feel less embarrassed, less ashamed. And after 18 months, I kind of came out the other side from that. And this accumulated in doing the London Marathon, not in a fast time, but in a sort of respectable time, got round, had accomplished something, had transformed, had raised some money for charity, had transformed physically at least. I mean, I was still in the process, like emotionally, spiritually. The rest of it, I don't think I'll ever get to the end, but I'm still, I've come a long way from that person at the end of the 2 years. But at the end of the 2 years, I was like, I had come to understand the benefit of struggle, like how much you get from struggle. And now struggle is the most important thing to me. Like, all I'm thinking about is when's my next struggle coming from? And like this weekend, today I was looking at like flights to Lyon because I wanted to go to the Alps and maybe I could do some climbing, because I was supposed to have a hiking weekend this weekend, but I'm not doing it. But, so that is, the struggle, the testing yourself, the internal voice, like managing your internal dialogue, learning to, speak to yourself with kindness, enthusiasm, learning to control your emotions as well. And that's why one of the things I like about the climbing is I like the conversation that you have with yourself. I don't want to be scared, but I'm not scared to be scared. I like it when it's difficult. I like, the conversation that you have, and then you've got to talk to yourself and reassure yourself and all, I think there's a real strength that you can learn in that is incredible. That's where you get this kind of like self-confidence and power from. It's by, giving yourself tests.
Yeah.
And then when you pass the tests, it's like each time it's like a little leg up.
Yep.
And so,
and I can I totally get what you're saying, but then immediately in my mind, I'm thinking of times where I have reached my limits. Like when I did Orisaba, I had been sick 2 days previous, and man, went into that thing, and I'm on the steep glacier, just so nauseated, so much vertigo. I got my ice axe in the ice, and I'm just swaying like a flag in the wind. Like I can't stay on my feet. Like you're right. This dialogue you're having, the experience, and you hit the farthest edge of like, I'd pushed my limits, everything. And man, it's not pleasant. It's not enjoyable, but man, I'm with you. I think
but let me tell you something. That's not your limit.
Well,
that might have been your limit that day, but that's not your limit. And so after I did the London Marathon, it was coming up to 2 years, and I was like, I've made a lot of progress in my life. I've been sober for 2 years. I want to do something on the anniversary of 2 years. I want to do a physical challenge. I just done the marathon. I loved it. I was in shape. So I was like, I don't know. I'd never done any climbing before. I'd never been walking in the hills. I'd done a bit like when I was a teenager, when I'd been made to by my parents or by school, and I hated it. Anyway, I was like, I'm going to do Kilimanjaro. I went to Kilimanjaro. I went in a kind of quite a soloist space, that I was there for myself, because of recovery and for this anniversary. And I wasn't telling everybody, but it was a kind of like quite a me experience, which I later came to see was not the way you should do these challenges. But anyway, for me there, I went, it was just all about me and like getting to the summit, and it was so powerful. I mean, I just remember there was one day where we had this very long like walk up a not very steep section, but I just couldn't believe that there I was, the person that that couldn't make their bed, 2.5 years earlier was there climbing this mountain. And I got to the summit and I came down, and it was difficult. I got altitude sickness. I was, sick. I had the runs. It was a challenge, like a proper challenge. And I came down and I felt nauseous for a couple of days. And as I was coming down, I was like, well, I ticked that. I'm glad I've done it, but that's it. I don't, Anyway, I cut down to the bottom the next 2 days later, and suddenly this kind of just like sense of something incredibly powerful came over me. I think it was partly a sense of achievement, but just this kind of like very deep sense of joy and purpose, and just literally just like deep, deep happiness. And I was like, yeah, I want to be a mountaineer now. And so from that, I just started going the whole time, mostly in the UK. And then the COVID thing I think COVID thing started. So that was my first year my first thing mountaineering, Kilimanjaro. The following December, I started doing some winter mountaineering in Scotland, which is quite challenging. Then the COVID thing started. And when it eased off that first point in the summer, I went to Europe, and I went to France, and I did 2 weeks in Chamonix, and I climbed Mont Blanc, and I did all these things. And by that point, I was like fully hooked. And then
that's the motherland right there.
Yeah, it was great. And then, then it's back into COVID, and I got out, I escaped to Spain, and I trained for triathlon, and then came back to London. It was obvious we were going into lockdown. At that point, I was like, I can't stay here. This environment is not good for me. I need to be doing something. And that's, I found this guy on Instagram his name is Ulises Corlevan. He's an Argentine, and he's the guy that has summited Aconcagua the most. So I contacted him. I said, listen, I want to do Aconcagua with you. And he said, well, that would be great, dude, but we are shut. No one's coming here. And I said, oh, right. And he goes, have you thought about going to Ecuador? They're open. And I was like, no, not really. I don't really know anything about Ecuador. And he's like, okay, contact this guy, Ossi Freire. Contacted Ossi Freire. He called me on WhatsApp. I was like, yeah, I got to get out of London. He's like, well, listen, we're open. And I got a group of climbers coming next week from Mexico. You can join them, no problem. So literally 2 days later, I'm on a flight to Ecuador. It's lockdown here. You're not supposed to be traveling. I like sneak to the airport. I'm like, they'll never let me out. But anyway, got through. The plane taking off in Madrid for Quito. I've never been so happy in my life. You know, it's like, so that was
freedom.
I was like, freedom. It was like, that was January 2021. Sorry, February 2021. Went to Quito, met you, had the rest of that trip, did the 5,000ers, did Chimborazo, stayed in Quito because I just loved it so much, did more climbing.
Well, and you did Cotopaxi and you did Chimborazo, and you did another?
Yeah, I did Antisana, which is amazing. Ilanitsa Sur I did by the ice climbing route. That was insane.
Wow.
I met some amazing people. I just loved it. I was like, that was a place where I really felt like I belonged, like I was at home. I was so happy. It was one of the happiest times of my life. It was, you know, everything about it. I loved it. I loved the place. I loved the people that I met, the scenery. It's just so beautiful. It's like a dream world.
I love Ecuador. And
yeah,
I love
it's
those
insane.
Mountains. Now, you mentioned those mountains, like, yeah, I just went and did those, and it was challenging, but I did them. Like, I went up Cotopaxi, didn't have time to do Chimborazo, but it's tough. Like, it's a lot of work to get above, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20,000 feet. Like, I remember messaging you right after you'd done Chimborazo, and like the sense of accomplishment and the struggle.
Yeah, it was a grind. It was a struggle. I don't think anything's worth doing if it's not a struggle. Like, obviously, like, I mean, in a physical sense, like a challenge, like, it's got to be tough. And it's funny, I did this rowing race last summer from Barcelona to Ibiza. And I remember at one point, it was just, the conditions were miserable. And I just said to myself, I was just like, I love this. And I just was saying to myself, I love this. And at some point I was like, yeah, I really do love this. And it didn't bother me how bad the conditions were. I was just like, at that point, I was just coping. It was not a big deal to me. And so people are always asking me, like, it sounds a bit big-headed to say this, like, are you worried about the Atlantic row? And I'm like, no, not really. But because I'm prepared, like the person that I was would have been a disaster in one of these events. Couldn't have coped for 2 minutes. But I've now been conditioning myself for 5 years. I've trained full time pretty much for 5 years. I haven't missed many days in the 5 years. I've run
which is a testament to who you have become. Right? It's all the making and the shaping and the transforming that can take place. And you're a new man, a different man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, consistency is the most important thing. Like, consistency is the hard, like, the people that I speak to, the one thing that a lot of, there's some super talented people that just don't have consistency, or that can't get beyond a certain point because they haven't been able to find the consistency. And I'm not quite sure how I found it. I just think that, I wanted something better for myself. I wanted something better than I was having. And I saw this as the route to get it. And so I just made myself do it for so many days. And it was sucked. I mean, when I started, it would take me like an hour to put the trainers on. I would just sit at the bottom of my stairs, like by the door. I just couldn't get the trainers on. And at some point, it stopped sucking and it started to feel good. And I just carried on doing it every day. And at some point, that became normal for me. Like, at the moment, I'm training 2 hours minimum a day, and it's just my new normal. But if I took the old me and plugged him into my life now, he would be dead.
Right.
And sometimes I'm like, sometimes I have to say to myself, like, if I'm feeling fatigued, I have to remind myself, yeah, you're doing like 2-3 hours training every day for 10 days in a row. Sometimes I don't take a break. I don't like off days. I don't like the reset day. It makes me more tired than if I don't have it for some reason. I know it's important. I had a rest day today. Actually, it was mandatory. I got a coach. I said to him, like, the rest day. He's like, no training today. I got performance testing tomorrow. So he was like, no training today. But I was like, yeah, I don't like it. I missed it this morning. I get, I think routine structure is super important. And if you can make that part of your routine, physical exercise, it can change your life in so many ways. And I don't mean you don't have to run a marathon, you don't have to become competitive, just in any way, like if you want to be a little bit better at your job, you want to be a little bit better husband. Okay, make this commitment. For the next 100 days, you're going to do a 5K run every morning. And I guarantee in the other things that you're doing, you'll get better.
Yep, it'll spill over.
You won't drink so much the night before. You'll go earlier to bed. You won't watch shitty Netflix till midnight. You'll be thinking, oh, fuck, I got to get up at 7 to go running.
I got something. Yeah.
And so 100 days, is for me, 100 days is like crucial. And I remember when I stopped drinking, I would be like, I stopped drinking my first day was June 10th, 2017. And so at the beginning, I would check on Google probably 10 times a day, days since June 10th, 2017. It'd be like 3 days. The next, I'd be checking the whole time. Now I never check. I know it was, it was a couple of thousand days ago, but I used to check 10 times a day, and then I get to 21 days, 23, and I just remember them all. And I remember getting to 100 days and just being like, wow, I can't believe I made it to 100 days, and then 200 days, and then 300 days. But in 100 days, if you can do something for 100 days, that's how you're going to change your life. You need to, for 100 days, whatever it is. And, and if someone came to me and said, look, I need to improve, I want to get better, I'd be like, okay, please do this for me don't do this for me, do this for yourself. For 100 days. 100 days is nothing. We're alive for 28,000 days on average. Okay, so 100 days out of your 28 is nothing. Do this for 100 days. Don't drink alcohol. Do 5-kilometer run every morning, which is nothing. It takes like half an hour. Do 3 or 4 things for 100 days and see what's happened. But don't do it for 20 days, and don't do it for 10 days and say, oh, nothing's happened. This is bullshit. I haven't lost any weight. My wife's still mad at me, whatever it is. Do it for 100 days. And then you get to 100 days and you're like, yeah, I'm a bit better. Okay, great. Now you're going to do it for 200 days. And that's how I just kept layering bits and bits on top of each other. And that's how I got better. It wasn't that I didn't change overnight. This didn't become like happy overnight. It was just a process. And I kept adding layers onto it, and I kept getting a little bit better. My integrity started to rise. I actually do what I say I'm going to do now. It's a miracle. I'm on time. I'm not fucking up. I don't let anybody down. But this, the integrity will come back, but you've got to work on it, and you've got to be consistent, and you've got to just keep at it and layering and layering and layering and layering and layering and adding on stuff. Then I started adding on stuff. I was like, I'm going to do personal development courses. I'm going to read personal development books. I'm going to have therapy. I'm going to have a life coach. I'm going to try and supercharge this. Yeah. And so it wasn't any one thing, but it was just that I managed to, I had the will and the drive and the hope, the hope that there was something better was waiting for me on the other side. I didn't know what it was. I still don't know what it is. And that's what's crazy about this is why I talk about the doors in the universe, is that I didn't know I was going to keto until 2 days before I went to keto. And when I went to keto, I didn't know that I was going to go to Nepal and be on an Everest expedition. So you are only ever 2 days away, or even a day, from your life changing beyond anything you can ever imagine, and it never being the same again. Yes. And so you've got to believe that the doors are there, they're going to open for you. But if you're always drunk, or you're always, whatever your
thing is,
you will not see these doors. Exactly. You will miss them, or they won't open for you because you don't deserve them in the first place. So you need to stop and look around and see where the door is opening. And then when it opens, you've got to charge straight through it.
Yeah. Whatever is stopping you, whatever is holding you back, whatever is blinding you. Yeah. Stop that enough where you can, well, I love to say that God and the universe are always conspiring in your favor, but you're exactly right. Spot on. Like if you're not in a place to even look up to see doors, or notice doors or opportunities. And then there's a little bit further down the road, you had to be ready. Like a trip to Ecuador wouldn't have served you much earlier. You had gotten to a place where the timing was right.
That's true.
And go and take advantage of those, right? It's like you're going along this path and you can't see around the curve. You got to put in the work, like you're saying, your 100 days, you're then stacking, doing your thing. You get around the corner, you start to see things you never saw were possible. And then there's that door, that life-changing door you're talking about. And you go through that thing and you're a new man.
Do you know what you just said when you said, whatever it is that's in the way? Do you know what is always in the way? It's yourself. You're always in your own way. And I even see, I'm a list maker, right? And I try and have the different headlines of the list, like, what's urgent today? What are the things? And then I'm trying to move everything along. And when at the moment I'm starting my business and I got the to-do lists, and whenever something doesn't happen, I say, well, why didn't that happen? What was in the way? And I was in the way. You've got to get out of your own way.
Yep.
And sometimes it's hard to see why you're always blocking yourself, why, you've got imposter syndrome. I had imposter syndrome all my life. Even when I was a pro, I was like, at polo, I was like, oh my God, they're going to find out that I'm not very good. It was just the insecurity, the lack of belief. I have it now, even like I'm launching the adventure business. I want to be doing the adventures, the mountains full time. Oh my God, what are the other operators going to think? They're going to think, who's this guy that hasn't done much? What's he doing? I have that all the time. So that is, that can be, you've got to just keep pushing forward, keep taking the steps. And it very often, especially when you come from a place like I have, where I was, very ineffective, you can't expect it to all happen overnight. You've got to just keep being patient, keep believing and keep hoping and keep, having faith that you're moving into, and that's what I always said to people and other people that, not that I left behind, because I haven't left anyone behind, but the people that, there was a whole bunch of guys that I drank heavily with that I've left behind, but I haven't, they're still my friends, but we're not doing the same things. And when they saw that, I was reading the books and having the courses and they would say, oh yeah, well, what's different? How is it different? And I was like, it's not binary, I didn't do the landmark course and suddenly something happened and I changed. It wasn't like that. It was like I was down here and I'm trying to get up here in the happiness stakes. And I'm just trying to keep moving up that scale, but it's not like it's not a huge jump like that, just a slider. And I'm always trying to move in that direction. I'm always trying to think about, who am I trying to become? How can I serve the world? What's my purpose? What are the things that are important to me that give me meaning? How can I give back? And how can I keep moving up here? Yeah. And not moving backwards also,
Yes, exactly. No sliding back.
Sliding back.
And your story is so inspiring to me, because you went from where you were to the guy who's rowing in the Mediterranean in horrible conditions. And like, I love this, right? That's rare to have that kind of mentality and that kind of mastery and that kind of love of struggle and challenge. Well, and then, rowing, you're going to race. Where are you going to race from? Across the Atlantic?
So I'm doing the Atlantic race. It's from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean, La Gomera to Antigua, and it's in December. And this is with one of my best friends and two other guys that are also close friends, or they're becoming close friends of mine, that we recruited together. And I think it's going to be a good challenge. I mean, we haven't talked about Everest yet. I mean, that was the real, when I was on Everest, I was just like, God, I can't believe I'm here. Yeah. I was literally just like, I couldn't believe it. And I would say to people, I'd be like, I just was like in shock. I was like, I cannot believe that I'm here. I can't believe that I'm climbing up the ladders in the Khumbu Icefall. I was like, just so full of joy. I was like a child on Christmas Day. Like, I just couldn't believe it. I was here and I was looking around and I just saw, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Ultimately it wasn't a great trip. Everyone in my expedition had COVID. I didn't summit. I got quite high up. I went to 7,000 meters on acclimatization. Wow. I then went down. I was very unwell. I had this chest infection. I went back to Lukla at the start of the Everest Base Camp Trail. I stayed in a hotel for 8 days, guest house. Yeah. Tried to recover. I did go back to base camp. I went back to camp 2, but I was like running on empty. I had nothing. So I stayed in camp 2 for about 4 or 5 days. There was a storm and I was trying to find the energy, but in the end, it wasn't there. I was sick. But I didn't regret it. I loved it. It was a great experience. I met some amazing people. I was just grateful to the universe that I got there and I saw it and I was part of it. And it was incredibly special experience. And I hope I get another chance. I hope I will. I'm sure I will. I really want to. It's top of the list of my list of things to do. And then the Atlantic Row is a different challenge. I think it's harder in some ways and easier in others. I think the 8,000 meter mountains, you need to have a lot of courage. There is a point of no return, where you can't be helped. If something happens to you, if you lose consciousness, it's very, there's a point where rescue becomes almost impossible. Can happen, but it's, so I think there's a point where you go, right, if I continue here now, I'm putting myself at considerable risk. I don't feel that for the row. I think it's fairly safe. As long as you stay with your boat, you're attached to the boat, you're safe. They've never had a fatality in the race. We had 2 fatalities in my group on Everest. So that was, but wow. It's different. It's 30 to 35 days of constant grinding every day, 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 24 hours a day for 30 to 35 days. So it's relentless.
Oh man.
Whereas Everest is like, there's periods of inactivity, and then there's periods where you do 12 hours, you rest another 12, but it's not, there's a lot of stopping. So this rowing it's different. I'm not going to be afraid in the sense that I was afraid at one point in Everest. There was a time when I was like, shit, this is, I'm afraid to go higher. I'm afraid it didn't stop me. It didn't paralyze me, but that was a conversation I had to have with myself, was like, yeah, I'm afraid. I was afraid. But I think that, that is the mark of a big challenge. Mm-hmm. It asks you questions that you don't get. That's why I love it. It's like, London's great. I like being here. My friends are here. My family's here. But the big questions, like, what's your true nature? What are you really capable of? What could you really do if you had to? That no one's asking you that here. Yeah, you could become a famous lawyer, or there are those challenges here, like academic ones. But in terms of like, what are you really made of? Like, how much guts have you got? These are, I think they're exciting things to find out. Like, yes. What am I, what can I really do if I want to, or what can I overcome? And so that's what I love about these big environments, the big arenas, the questions that you get asked there. It's just like, and for me, I get there and I'm like, this is tough, but this is, to get to this point, this is the pleasure. This is the bit that I'm grateful for, and ultra marathon runners talk about that. They hit the point, on the 100-mile race where they're in agony, and they get there and they say, this is the best bit. I'm here now. This is the privilege, is to be here at this point and to have this experience and to know how I'm going to react and what I'm capable of. And so that's how I see them. All the answers are there.
And that's, and as I'm hearing your story, that I just keep reminded that, like, that's a place that can be earned. It's an experience that can be won. It's easy to tell ourselves, like, oh man, those guys, they have it and I don't. Or, oh, yes, they're so lucky they can be so tough and have this, but you earn it. Like, you work for it. The consistency, the vigor, the drive, the challenge, the mindset, the heart set, the skill set. It's like, it's something that can, and I think I'm with you. I think it ought to be sought after, and one to see what we're capable of becoming.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the problem with Instagram culture, is that you see people that have got mastery, but you don't see the backstory to that. You don't see the 10,000 hours that they did before they were 10 years old. You just see the, elite performers, and you think, God, how can I ever get to that point? And, you can get, even if you're, I'm 40, I can improve a lot in the next 10 years. I can still get a lot better physically, obviously emotionally and spiritually. And, I think with my career, all the big wins are going to come in the future. I used to think that, God, when I was at 28, that was I had this one year, 2011, I won the team I played in. We played 47 games. We won 44. I was like, I never have another year like that. Flow state, everything. I'm going to have years like that, I'm sure.
Yep.
But it takes time, and you have to try, and you have to improve, and you have to, you've got to have a plan. And the problem with like big ambitions is that sometimes it seems like even hopeless, even starting, because, the steps that you have to take are so many that to actually get to the final objective, it just seems like almost impossible. But you just got to keep taking small steps, keep moving, keep moving towards your objective.
I love it. And so tell us what you're chasing now. You got the Atlantic race. You're starting this business. Tell us this business you're starting.
So, I've been working in finance in the last few years, and I think I come to the point where, like, it's in the same way as when I was 20. They said, "What do you want to be?" And I said, "I want to be a polo player." And now I want to be an adventurer. And the reality of that is that means you got to take other people on adventures. That's how you can monetize them. And so I've set up an adventure business. It's called True Summit Adventures.
Love it.
I was looking for a name that I thought would express some of the, like the sort of the emotional, spiritual side that I see in adventures, the lessons that you can learn. And I think True Summit is, in mountaineering, there's the commercial summit and there's the true summit. And so on some mountains that are, Manaslu is the famous one. For years and years, until this last season, in fact, people always climbed to the commercial summit, because the true summit was kind of like across this very difficult section. And then it was only about 3 or 4 meters up, or maybe 5 meters higher, but it was harder to get to. And so at some point, someone just said, yeah, we'll just climb to the commercial summit and we'll call that the summit. But lots of people were like, yeah, I've done Manaslu. I went to the commercial summit, but I haven't summited. I didn't go to the true summit. So the true summit for me is like, it's the top, but it's like your best self. It's the best version of you. It's like, it's what we should all be aspiring to, is the true summit. The commercial summit is bullshit. And so I'm calling it True Summit. My first trip's in June. I'm taking people to Kilimanjaro. I can't do a lot this year because I'm doing the row, and the row takes up a lot of time. So I'm laying the foundations this year. I'm hoping to have a full program next year where I'm going to take people to Ecuador, people to Nepal, back to Kilimanjaro, Mount Kenya. And I'm just going to add on these trips. And in between the trips, I'm going to try and do my personal projects, which are the 8,000 meter mountains. So Everest.
You're still gonna chase the 8,000 meter mountains.
That's my main thing. Like that's the thing I want to do the most. So, but around that, I want to create a community, and I want to share this with other people and see if they can get some of what I feel I've got out of it.
Yep.
And I'm taking a corporate group to the mountains in a couple of weeks' time. So yeah, there's I can see a bit like what you do. You take people, right, as well as part of your coaching. Yeah. So I think I can see a part of that there's a corporate groups. In England we have this thing like called corporate days, where you go to like a place and it's a facility and you do this like puzzles, like outdoor puzzles. For me, this is rubbish. It's like totally arbitrary, made up task, like balancing bricks on each other, whatever it might be, but it doesn't relate to the adventures. Like climbing a mountain, it's a journey. It's like real life. It's like, and you can if you go as a group and you'll work together, you can create incredible cohesion in that moment. You can give people confidence. And, I did this with a group in October. I took them to the highest mountain in England, in the UK, Ben Nevis. And for them, it was like some of the guys were super unfit. And, for them, it was like they really felt the sense of achievement getting to the top at the end.
It's real.
So yeah. So I'm a big believer in that, getting people into the outdoors. So that is my main focus at the moment. True Summit Adventures. I'm doing some other projects for people while that comes to fruition, but that's my main hope and my main dream for the future, is that I'll be doing the adventures and be taking other people with me.
Beautiful. Both of those are beautiful, but that's awesome, man. Did you have a domain already for that?
No, so the website's being built at the moment,
okay.
And I think it's going to be good. Fantastic. I got this very nice lady I think she's in Serbia, that's doing it.
Fantastic. Well,
she's another person that's living the dream. Like, she's working remotely, she's traveling around the world. She does it, I'm like, that's how I love being in different places. I love being, I love the UK, but I love Quito, I love Kathmandu. I want to know what it's like in La Paz and all these places. And that's how, I think there's so many people, they just get locked into an idea of how their life should be. And they just kind of like travel through this very like narrow trajectory, and it's like university, get married, have children, get a job, do a couple of nice holidays a year with the kids. And they kind of get to like retirement age, and they haven't really, they built some equity in their house and they got a good pension, and, their kids are at uni and everyone's happy-ish, but they, I'm not saying that that's not the right way to live, but it's not for me. I want to see like through a broader lens. I want to travel more. Same, just like you. I mean, when I met you, I was like, this guy has got it all sorted. And I was looking at your Instagram. I was like, holy shit, they're in Guatemala. They're building a house. They got a foundation. I was like, this is an amazing life. And doing it all with 7 kids. I was like, and now people are like, like if I go on a date, and the girl says, so do you want to have kids? And I'm like, and they're like, well, how are you going to do that with your adventures? And I'm like, listen, have you ever thought about this? Buying a boat and sailing it around the world and having these kids on it and like homeschooling them and the girl's like, no, I haven't thought about that. Probably isn't going to work then. But yeah, I don't mean like an expensive boat. I mean like a sort of kind of like smallish yacht that costs $100,000, but you sail it around the world. That's one of my dreams. Is I don't sail, but I want to learn. And saying to someone, I just bought this boat, and they're like, well, you don't know shit about boats. It's like, okay, I bet you this. I will meet you in Tokyo with dinner in 6 months' time. See you there. If I get you there, dinner's on you. And they'll be like, okay. And then I'm going to learn to sail this boat, and I'm going to sail it to Tokyo. That's one of my dreams.
That is awesome. So, yeah, that's the same. And we wanted to raise our family that way. We want to, I just feel this sense of, man, you get one good shot at being alive and making the most of yourself and living and making a difference. Just go for it. And figure it out.
When else would you do it if not now? Yep. And some people, say to me like, oh, it's interesting. I was like, well, when should I do the things I want to do? Like in my next life.
Right. If not now, then when? I 100% agree. Oh, brother, you've shared so many nuggets here in your story, so many things that are applicable to all of us in whatever aspect of life we're on. I mean, I'm just sitting here listening like, yes. You're just nailing these takeaways for all of us. I appreciate that so much, for you making the time and sharing your story so openly and honestly, because there's so much we can all learn from and be inspired by it. Any last thoughts, any last words of advice, or anything else we didn't touch on you want to share for the men listening today?
Get yourself a good coach is one of my bits of advice. And I'm being coached by somebody at the moment for my rowing, and he's become a bit more than that. And he's giving me he's also like an experienced adventurer, and he's giving, I'm getting a lot from it. And I can see that when the best year I had playing polo, we had a coach, and he came to the games and he coached us. And I went for lessons with him. Like I hadn't had lessons since when I started polo. Then suddenly I'm a professional. I'm going for lessons. And the guy was like, yeah, but if you change this slightly with your swing, suddenly I'm hitting the ball like 30 yards further, I think coaching can really help people. Like, you've got to have a North Star that you're heading towards. And then it's fine to have handrails to get there. And your handrails can be the books, the handrails can be having a coach, but get your North Star and then lock onto it and just give it everything you've got. And, you've got to just, these 100 days, stop drinking for 100 days and just go flat out full and see where you can take it. And I'm still, I could tell you all the time, like, I'm in shock half the time when I'm doing something. I just did this mountaineering guiding qualification I passed the other day. I was like, the guy told me I passed. I was like,
what?
I put a lot into it. So I wasn't surprised, but I was like, get qualifications is another thing. Get qualifications, just keep investing in yourself, keep developing yourself, keep reading the books. But yeah, I think getting qualifications is a good thing because it actually is like a program. Get the qualification. And if you say, like, let's say, for example, you want to be something that needs like whatever it is, let's say financial advisor, and you need to get those qualifications. If you don't pour everything into getting them, that's a sign that you're on the wrong path. And also, people should know that it's okay to be on the wrong path, and it's okay to say. And so that was a problem for me, that I always felt like I had to be a certain type. There was an expectation that I would be a certain, the expectation is in London that you're going to be in professional services, that you're going to be something like that. Mm-hmm. Then to try and break out of that, that's one of the reasons why I like keto, because I feel I can express myself more there, But that's also something I have to transcend here. It's like, it's not, things won't always go your own way. So you have to, batten down the hatches through those periods, ride them out, improve, and try to get better and see where, but just keep the layering.
Yeah. Keep stacking on it, keep moving forward.
Keep stacking them up, seeing where it can go.
I love it, brother. I love it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What's next for the amazing Denning family? Because, I feel like you guys are on a hell of a journey, but do you feel like with the kids, they got to go to college? Is like the band going to break up? You've got the younger kids, you've got the older kids, you're going to keep traveling. How's the magic going to keep on happening?
Yeah, we're to that point now where older kids are becoming young adults, and it feels like the band is breaking up. You're excited for them, right? To launch into life. You're like, yeah. There goes part of the band, so to speak. So our oldest daughter, she moved out last year, and she's doing super well, and actually wants to go on a big mission trip. So she's getting ready for that. Our son, who just turned 18, has become a professional stuntman.
Wow.
He's stunting in movies, doing cool stuff, getting another qualification, a certification this weekend for another training. He's just chasing that voraciously. That's his dream. The rest of us are going to keep traveling. We're hitting a road trip here in just a couple of weeks, going another big long road trip. We did a 7-month road trip last year. We're doing 3 months this year, and then we're going to move our family back to Europe. We want to get back over there. So we did a scouting trip recently, and we're heading to Portugal.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say envious, because I think envy is a bad thing, but I'm in full of admiration for the setup that you've got and how mobile you are, and how it's just like, it's all driven by love. It's like love, exploration. We're going to see the world. I like what you guys have got going on. It's very cool. It's inspirational. And I feel like, that's a direction I want to head in, be mobile, see new things, have new experiences.
Yep. And the cool thing about it all is when we started this like 15 years ago, we didn't know how to do it or what to do. We just knew we wanted to design a unique family lifestyle. And man, we lost count of how many people told us it wasn't possible. And in the dark times of struggle and failure, we even wondered, like, maybe it's not possible. Maybe we're crazy. But we kept pushing, because we're like, no, this is how we want to do life. We want to do life on our terms. We want to live this extraordinary life. Like and I've got this quote right here on my office wall. It says, I will either find a way or I'll make one. I'm like, man, I'm just going to keep pushing until I make a path or find a path I can't see yet. But man, I can, and you're doing the same thing too, right? Where you just stop and say, okay, what is it I really want? What is it that is really working and will serve us? And then just keep going until you get or create the thing you want. And so, yeah, we love our life, man, and love this world and love big adventures like you. And I can't wait to get back to the base camp at Everest. One of my favorite places.
Let's do one together. Let's do one.
Yes. I spent 4 days in Lukla too. We had yak sizzler there every day because it was so good.
Amazing. Yes.
But yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Let's hit up a big trip and go do something awesome again. I want to get on a mountain with you again, brother.
I remember when I arrived in Lukla and you're in the Himalayas, because when you're in Kathmandu, that's not the Himalayas. You get to Lukla and you just step out, and I just remember this
you're in
calm, washing over me, and I was like, yeah, special place.
Same. Awesome, brother.
Thanks for
thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for being an inspiration. So the race is coming up soon, and we'll be cheering for you, brother.
Yeah, you can tag if anyone follow my team, that you could tag. We're called on Instagram. We're at Team This Way Up.
Perfect.
And you can follow. There's a tracker and everything on the race, and yeah, it's a lot of the time I just sort of see myself as who I used to be. So I don't think of anything that I'm doing as particularly different or unusual. But I wanted to do unusual things, and so I'm glad that people are like, wow, that's unusual or is a big challenge. And yeah, I'm very happy that I'm participating in them, and this one in particular. And I hope there's many more to come. I just, that's the life I'm trying to design, is you just go from one to another and you take other people on them and see where it all goes.
Exactly. Awesome. Thank you, brother. Thanks for being here.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Greg.
Hey, fellas, thanks for listening. Hope you had a great experience listening to him and captured some great insights to apply in your life so we can be the very best version of ourselves as husbands, fathers, businessmen, leaders, and men. Just a quick reminder, the Be the Man app is available. Jump on there, get in the community, and get the tools and the resources, the training in there. You can go download it for Android or iOS. And just when you go over to the section and Discover, you jump in there and there's a free course called Level Up. And it's got my recommended reading list in there and some training and resources. Jump in there and grab that. And when you're ready, gentlemen, join us in the Be the Man Masterclass and Tribe to get the tools, the training, and the tribe to be the very best version of yourself. Be the man.